Okay, hopefully this works as a continuance. Okay, you mentioned the cable TV in America and hotels, and it was even a crappy hotel. And I want to tell you that in America, the crappy hotels have the best TV. Good hotels have crappy TV. And just for your information. So yeah, it probably was awesome TV. Um, Again, I don't know what, I don't remember what you said, but my note was that we wiped out our cousins, not the ancestors. Okay, I mean because the ancestors die of natural causes. I mean you could kill your ancestor, but let's just say if you do it a couple generations later, it's just killing the one that was more like your ancestor. I also wanted to bring up the issue of dolphin intelligence, not to be too new agey about this or aggrandize it, but they have a lot of mental capacity, but they have no writing instruments. Their lack of opposable thumb, living in the ocean, they don't have a way really to do writing instruments as far as we know. They don't record their philosophy. But we also know that humans didn't do that for a long time and had oral traditions. So, assuming they could have oral traditions and just how rich those oral traditions are and how much we rely on them still today now that we write them down, um, I think the human intellect, we don't even know what situation that we're in on Earth, right? Okay, you mentioned you think I might be a systems guy and that I'm confusing, and that you're trained in that, but you're not. I think you are pretty much a systems guy. I think one of the positive thing about objectivists is they tend to be systematic, right? And they want to figure out a system that works, or they think that they have. And not to characterize you that way, but that goes with that, and as an individual, I think so. But anyway, whichever. I definitely think of things systematically like that. And on the issue of a group of cells, there's this concept I believe in, that is individuable, individuable things. That's what an individual is. You are able to see it as an individual, and you can individuate almost anything, right? You can look at a random pattern. You can look at a cloud and individuate out of all of the colors of the cloud a face, and that's individuable. And the basis of the individuation is, what you want to judge if you want to compare it to another one. In and of itself, it's an individuation. And so, obviously, there's a pretty clear systematic cluster of relationships between the cells which share the genetic information of a body. Okay, so I mean, it's a good basis to individuate, but it's still just a group, and those cells are just individuated groups of molecules and so on and so forth. And there's always examples that bridge these individuations that it's hard to know. Symbiotic bacteria that live only in human bodies, that's obviously different by genetic means. But then again, if you just looked at the cells of a body, you'd go, hey, there's these cells in here that do this. And, you don't necessarily need to go by the genes. All right. The thing about humans being obviously distinct, I'm going to state the obvious and say that all animals are obviously distinct, right? Everything is obviously distinct. Two fingerprints look a lot alike. I can't tell the difference between them, but I know I could because I know they're distinct. And everything's obviously distinct. So that's a weak argument. We're talking about how distinct it is, and I'm saying, well, partly that's, I think, skewed by the fact that there's this accident of history and or you know genocide of species similar to humans. That explains why we're so distinct, and none of that distinction is fundamental, right? In other words, we're all connected continuously. And just because there's missing cousins, not a missing link, we're getting really good on the link from us back in time, but missing cousins. Cousins is like, what killed them out? Why aren't they here now? And it could have just been that none of them, well, it could be that they were all intelligent, and intelligence just, they tend to self-destruct. Maybe they killed themselves. On the other hand, I think it likely, considering how warlike we are, that we took them out. At least some of them. Okay, so the last thing is you're talking about science and philosophy being distinct from science. But this was going to be point number whatever on my bullet list here, because I am a natural philosopher. And there's a history of that. And basically, in natural philosophy, you take as, when you have an arbitrary selection to make, it's like, look, I could posit it this way, I could use Cartesian coordinates, I could use hyperbolic coordinates. What should I use? All these ideas that we like as skeptics especially, but all philosophers really have this skeptical reflective, we like to hear ideas, even other people's ideas, that we go, no, I don't believe that. How do we choose among them? And for a natural philosopher, the question is, well, let's look at nature. We'll look for metaphors from nature to say if which ones are more similar to our ideas, and if they are, then those are the ideas we'll go with. You know what I mean? So, for example, we think that at one point in our history that lines are made of points. But after calculus, they say, oh no, they're made of these infinitesimally short line segments. That's a better way to think of them. And it works better. It works better in nature. In math, it's like, well, does it work better? I don't know. You could do either way. But if you want to apply it to nature, it works better. So fine, the point thing is out. It's just wrong now, because compared to nature, there's calculus. And calculus works awesome in nature compared to this older geometric idea that a two-dimensional thing was made up of one-dimensional things. And the same thing, a three-dimensional thing is not made up of two-dimensional things. It's made up of an interval of two-dimensional things. If you have a plane in three-dimensional space in calculus, it has an infinitesimal height. It has that dimension. If it doesn't have that dimension at all, it'll never have that dimension. So with natural philosophy, we come to conclusions like this based on the fact that it matches reality. So, it brings in science. So I believe science is absolutely a part of philosophy, because if you look at the history of science, if you study the history of science, they start off in the West with natural philosophy. And it was called that, Mary Shelley called it that in her novels, and Newton called that in his work. It was natural philosophy. It wasn't just a term. That's where it came from. The hobby of the philosophers, the side of natural philosophers, started to look more and more like, well, we'll just look at nature. And that allowed them to have testability. And they developed science. So in what sense would science not be a part of philosophy? Now, it's a subset of philosophy. And you don't have to be limited to it, because for one thing, with the way science has gone, the inability to, in any final sense, interpret it has been, proven. So anybody's interpretation goes, as long as it coheres with natural philosophy, including physics. And it is specifically physics. All the other sciences are in some way trying to borrow the success of physics. Even chemistry, which certainly has its own history, said, well, legitimized itself from alchemy by trying to adopt physics. And, sciences that can't actually adopt physics directly try to adopt the methods of physics. And what is physics? It's natural philosophy. So absolutely, I think that in the modern time, now it doesn't mean you have to be an expert in physics, but you can't ignore the issues. And if you're not going to become an expert, just like always, you're going to have to figure out which experts to rely on, make your guesses and whatnot. And it's not that hard to become a philosophical expert. It's not like you have to understand the hard parts, the mathematical parts, but you do have to understand and maybe trust a little on some of the interpretations of what experiments might mean. But there, I believe there are just natural language, common sense ways to explain, you know, quantum physics sufficiently for someone to say that they're taking, the